I did not grow up with church. I didn't grow up going to church, which was strange. You know, my dad grew up as an altar boy, so I always question why we didn't go to church.
I grew up in a family that attended church, but we attended church as a responsibility, as a duty. It was a very rigid, you tick the box, we went to church on Sunday, everything is okay.
My middle son became best friends with Charlie at preschool, and Charlie is Whitney's daughter, and she invited us to LCBC at the movies, and we couldn't make that work. She didn't continuously, say, hey, come to church, come to church. It wasn't like that at all. We casually talked about it, and she knew that I had questions. So when she invited us to Christmas, it just fit, and we were able to go. We got all dressed up. Even though you don't have to, it was something special. So
we walk in, and already the atmosphere is just very different, and it just doesn't feel like church.
I don't know, it's just this immediate connection as soon as you walk through the door. And then we came again the next weekend, and we made it a point to come again each weekend. I didn't know how much I needed God. But when I came to Christmas, I had no idea that it would take me to where I am. I had no idea that Whitney's invite and her friendship would get me through the hardest time of my life. I felt a lump in my right breast. After finding the lump, each gathering was like a direct communication to what we were going through.
As so much of our story over the last few years as can be laid out is God put LCBC and this group of people in our path.
I finally knew what faith was. It was a process between coming at Christmas and going through cancer that I started to trust Jesus. And I'm cancer-free. Yeah, it's 3 years. It's easy to remember because 3 years with LCBC, 3 years of giving myself to Jesus and being there with God and knowing that He's there, that invite was everything to us.
So you hear stories like that, and just that last line just keeps ringing in my head. That invite made everything to us, made all the difference in the world to us. And, you know, it's funny because I need to hear stories like that, because if you're anything like me, you know, I've been coming here 13 years, and if you've been here 2 weeks, 2 years, 10 years, whatever, you start to get used to it. You start to get used to what God's doing around here. And there's something really special about inviting someone to come and seeing through their eyes what God's doing here. And that's kind of what we are. You know, it's kind of part of our DNA. It's something, especially at Eve gatherings every year. You know, it's awkward, it's difficult, but we put on something here, and then staff, you, everyone, we all partner with each other, and we bring people to this. And it's difficult because, you know, you don't want people thinking you're going to some cult or something like that. Come join me at church, and it feels weird sometimes, but it's worth it because it can lead to life change. And honestly, it's part of a bigger story. It's not just who we are as LCBC. It's who we are as Jesus followers. It's been so from the start. If you look at the first parts of the Gospels, like in the first couple chapters of John, they come up to Jesus, and they're like, so Jesus, where are you staying? What are you teaching? All that. He says, come and follow. Come and see. So it's that invitation. It's innocuous, but it's kind of like so powerful. First couple chapters of Luke, we're going to be looking at this today, where the angels, they say to the shepherds, they're like, come and see what's going on here. There's some amazing stuff that's happening in Bethlehem. Come see what's happening. So it's all part of that invitation-based thing. That's kind of what Christmas is like. You know, your job inviting people is almost angelic. You know, it's a message. We're bringing people to here. And so we're gonna talk about that whole first Christmas and what it was like. But man, invite someone. Make sure you get in on this thing of bringing someone to this place, because seeing that life change is just amazing, and seeing it through their eyes for the first time is amazing. So we are going to talk about a little bit about Christmas today, and we're going to have some fun because we're going to talk about family stress. And that's always fun, you know? It's great stuff. Over the next 2 weeks, there's something coming. It's called Christmas dinner. And for a lot of us, you know, we have in our minds like, oh yeah, it'll be great, but then in reality, sometimes it's not so great. And so where we want to start off with is going back to that first Christmas. And we want to eventually lead into what the better way is and finish up this series called Better Ways. So first off, just talked about how the angels went to the shepherds, you know, and they said, hey, you got to come see what's going on here in Bethlehem. So what did they see? What did these shepherds see as they left and went up, because you had to go up a hill into Bethlehem. They went up to see what was going on. And a lot of us have this in our minds, you know, this kind of wooden type of deal. I always say it's, you know, it's like a Norwegian house. You know, if you ever seen those pictures of like the houses in Norway, they're all picture perfect. They have nice little cute decorations, you know, and I don't know, maybe there's like a little window here and there's a door and there's a nice little flower box. You know, you got little flowers sticking out. And for those of us who are brought up on claymation, you know, the specials at Christmas time every year, like those Rankin Bass things, where it's like the little drummer boy who's like, Papa, you know, that kind of thing. For the rest of you who don't know what that is, it's not that weird, but it is. So a lot of us, we were brought up on kind of the Hollywood version, the Rankin Bass version of what Christmas was. And I do remember an old Christmas special where the guy's at the inn, he's at the hotel, and he's the innkeeper. And, you know, Joseph is running around because he has this really great plan to put a pregnant woman on a donkey and go 80 miles to someplace in the middle of the night, try to find a hotel room. And as he does so, he goes to this inn, and there's this really cantankerous innkeeper who's like, no room in the inn. If you want someplace, you've got to go to the barn, you know. And Joseph's like, oh, like that. It's not what happened, okay? We're going to look at what the real deal was. We're going to strip away the myth, and we're going to talk about what the actual thing, what actually happened in reality. Because listen, all right, so Joseph was a dude. I get it, okay? Dudes can plan from time to time, okay? We're not completely clueless. And I don't think Joseph was either. See, Joseph was from the line of David. He was part of the family of David. David's hometown was Bethlehem. So because he was part of this lineage, he could have walked to anywhere in Bethlehem and say, can I stay here tonight? I'm part of David's line. You know, I'm part of the family of David. And they would have been like, yeah, you bet, no problem. There was no one that refused them entrance. That didn't happen. There was no hotel. There was no Norwegian wood-paneled barn. You know, a lot of us have this kind of in mind, this kind of salt box type of thing off to the side where there's all this hay sticking out, you know, and there's the ox and lamb kept time and the drummer boy that comes. It wasn't that way at all. Or we have a picture of this with like glowing babies and halos and all that kind of stuff. That was a medieval device for paintings back then that like, this is Jesus, you know. Didn't happen that way. It was very normal. But it didn't happen like someone denying them entry somewhere. In fact, what's so fascinating about this is that hospitality was a huge thing for people back then. There's no way they would have denied entry to a pregnant woman. I mean, you can go to the south side of Chicago tonight with a pregnant woman and say, hey, can we stay here? They'd probably be like, sure. Much less the Middle East. I mean, hospitality was huge for people back then. Let's kind of recreate what really happened. People lived in houses back then. They kind of looked like a shoebox. They were about 20 feet wide, 10 feet deep. And so you had a door over here for like animals, and you had like a regular door and maybe like a window here. Top down, if you were looking at it, it was a normal house was divided into 3 sections, okay? You had your garage, okay? So this is where you kept your animals. This is where you kept like your lamb or your sheep or whatever, and just a few. And usually had a door that opened up this way. You put some straw bedding, and you built like a half wall into it out of rock. And there were some steps that led up to the living room. So the living room, that's where you watch your Netflix, you eat your Cheerios, all that kind of stuff. It was like a multi-purpose room. Everything happened here. In between the garage and the living room was this half wall where they usually carved out like 2 little basins that you could put water in. It's a manger. It was for the animals to drink from. I mean, in our day, like most of us have utility sinks in our garage. where you would pour like turpentine and like paint down. We expect it's gonna like some magically disappear, but yeah, that's kind of what a utility sink was. So you have your living room, and then this area was a guest room. And this is the word that Luke says when he says there was no room for them. There was no room for them in the guest room. Old translations of the Bible have there was no room for them in the inn, and that's where we get this idea, that there was like a hotel. But really what it was a guest room. In fact, Luke uses later in Luke chapter 10, he talks about a hotel. He talks about an inn. He uses a completely different word. This word was used for guest rooms, and this was common for people back then, that they'd always have a guest room available for somebody. Later on, Jesus sends out the disciples. He's like, don't take anything. Just rely on people's hospitality, because that's what you relied on. So the people of Bethlehem are off the hook in terms of like being mean and not allowing somebody to stay there. But there is a problem here. There's a couple problems, actually. This place was crowded. Luke says there was no room in the guest room, so they had to give birth in the garage and then place Jesus in the manger. And there's something in me that goes, okay, so wait a second. This place was all crowded. The guest room was crowded, the living room was crowded, you had to give birth in the garage. I mean, I guess I kind of get that. Why was it so crowded? Well, because there was a census, and this was probably in September, so they were celebrating a festival of booths. So the whole place was jammed, like Bethlehem was jammed. The whole place was crowded. But give birth in a garage? And then put Jesus in a utility sink? I mean, wasn't there someone at some point who's like, wait, here, come on, let's put him in here. We can move Aunt Bertha over a little bit. Sorry, it probably wasn't Aunt Bertha. It was probably like Aunt Miriam or whatever, but just move her over a little bit. Let's put him in here. But it seems like they were way too busy, way too crowded. And that's the overarching type of theme that Luke hits here, is that, hey, there was no space. There was no room. I mean, think about that for a minute. The Son of God is born. The author of like quantum physics can heal cancer. He's the Son of God, who created the universe, and he's in a utility sink. One other thing we know from this is that usually when someone was born in that house, you went and you sang to people up and down your neighborhood. Like if we were to give birth, if someone were born today, and we wanted to, rightfully celebrate this. This is how people would do it back then. They would go out, they get like 3 or 4 people together, and they'd sing up and down the lane. John Wilkinson is born today. John Wilkinson is born today. And all the neighbors would be like, oh, look, yeah, Edna had her baby. Oh, that's so beautiful. Robert, look, someone, and Robert's like, whatever. Yeah. So that's kind of what happened. But it didn't happen. And it gives you more and more kind of an insight on what this house was like. Crowded relatives who couldn't give a rip. And maybe they did help out Mary. Maybe they gave her some water and stuff like that, but they were just way too busy. And so I wonder if God at some point, he's like, all right, that's enough. If you aren't going to sing to my boy, I'm going to find some people to sing for my boy. So he gets the angels, and he sends them about 1.5 miles out. Go to that field out there. Go to shepherds. Now, in this culture, shepherds are kind of like the pub dwellers, the bottom of the totem pole, the gritty. They weren't even allowed to give testimony in court. They were seen as snaky and dishonest. He picks those people to hear this message. And look at the difference. You got all the good, upstanding people of Bethlehem in this house, the churchgoers, the nice people. They don't have time for it. They don't even realize the miracle is happening under their own roof. And then you've got shepherds who are taking care of sheep at night, and what's their reaction? They're like, let's go. Come on, guys, let's go. Let's go see what's going on here. They're at least open to it. And you got these people here, when the shepherds show up, I can imagine, every one of us knows what a crowded house full of relatives is like, right? You can imagine some of them being like, well, this is nice and all, but how much longer are they going to stay? I got to get to Jerusalem in the morning, and that is killer. Or shepherds? Oh, do we have to feed them too? Oh. The attitude. Almost all of us know what that's like. and it's coming. It's called Christmas dinner. It is. Part of it, I'm assuming at least half of you are just like, I know. We all know what it's like to crowd a bunch of dysfunctional family together that see each other 3 times a year, don't we? Yes, we do. Because family plus holiday plus together, it always equals disconnection. Isn't that weird? Why does that happen? Because, there are elements to this whole Christmas dinner thing and celebrating the holidays. First, there's lots of eating, which leads to lots of drinking. And then after lots of drinking, it leads to lots of gossip. People are talking, did you hear what someone, and I can't believe this. I know there's gossip going on when I hear this. And for some reason, someone puts on copious amounts of perfume. I think they burned out their bulbs in their nose. They just, well, I can't smell it, so nobody can smell it. We can smell it. After 3 of those, it's enough. 2 is preferable, please. Of course, that always leads to someone complaining about their back pain, which then leads to other people taking liberties with other pains and stuff we don't want to know anything about. I didn't even know what colitis was when I was 5 years old, and I kept hearing about it. Which, of course, leads to the person who wants to preach about what to eat, when to eat, how to eat it, and when to do it. Of course, exercise, which always culminates in the ever-popular NPR versus Fox News. Right? So true. I remember going to my nan's every Christmas. Christmas Eve was great. Christmas morning was great. We opened up our presents and things like that. But then we hear the thing, hey, John, we're going to go to Nan's house. You got to put on the clip-on tie, which just is totally uncomfortable. 4 people thrown into a backseat with no seatbelts. And my mom, for 45 minutes, going on about the rules. Don't take too many hors d'oeuvres. Don't drink too many sodas. Don't tell anybody what your sister did. And like all these things over and over again, she's just going on and on and on. And we're like, Mom, we know. And every time we interrupt her, she goes right back to the start. Right back to the start. Not kidding you. And then, when she gets annoyed with us for not listening, she'll poke my dad. And my dad, you can just see in the rearview mirror, he's in a totally different time zone. He's just driving. He's on a boat somewhere catching fish, okay? God love him. So she would poke him and be like, listen to your mother. And then my sister wants to be at the adult table because there's an adult table and a kid table. My older brother, he collects beer cans, so he wants to hang out with Uncle Heinz, who doesn't really speak English. And then the other brother, my next older brother, he's got his football and the plastic tee. He wants to watch football, play football, do football all day long. And there's no one there my age. So what do? I try to fly under the radar and drink as many sodas as I can and chase the cat. That was my Christmas. And I knew back at 5 years old, it was amazing how we did this every year, and we really still didn't know each other. We never really connected. I think this is typical in our culture. We talk about Christmas being a time of love, but it really isn't. It's like we put up with each other. And so that's why we need to hear Paul today, because Paul has been telling us about a better way, and we've been learning all kinds of different ways that love, being the better way, will guide us. And he says here in chapter 13, we're going to look at it in a second, he says, there is a better way of love. And I think it applies to Christmas dinner. It's got to apply to this Christmas dinner because we can't keep doing these years and years of disconnection and overcrowding and not really meeting each other. And because we all talk about loving our family. We all talk about connecting with family, but we've got to actually do it. We can't just talk about it. Any 14-year-old will tell you, any 12-year-old will tell you. I mean, if you say, do you love your siblings? Yeah, I love them. Do you show your love? No. And that's kind of what family becomes like. We talk about loving our family, but we don't really show it. And so there are some practical ways that Paul's going to give us that is a better way to do Christmas dinner and to not have this massive oversight of what God's doing in our midst. So go ahead and grab your Bibles. On all our campuses, if you can grab your Bibles in front of you, next to you, wherever they are. Open up to 1 Corinthians 13. It's on page 878 if you're using these Bibles. You can open up your apps on your phones. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Paul talks about a better way, and he's mentioning a bunch of things. It's just a letter of a follower of Jesus to a bunch of people that live in a place called Corinth. And as he's detailing what the better way is, he says, look, guys, love is the better way. And it's not like hippie love. It's not like vibe love. It's actual, real, active love. Like, what can we do that's an action that we can show people that we love them, we want to serve them? So chapter 13, verse 4. Paul talks about what love is and what love isn't. Verse 4 says, love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable. It keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith. It's always hopeful and endures through every, I just missed the last part of that, through every circumstance. Thank you. I shut the Bible. As soon as I shut it, I'm like, I know it started with a C. I don't know whatever it was. Through every circumstance. Thank you for the front row for helping me out on that. You've done your job. First part that Paul talks about here, though, he says, love is patient and kind. And when I think of kindness, when I think of patience, I think back to I think of kindergarten teachers. I mean, talk about patience and kindness. I think about kind words, things you can say to people. So what we've done here on every campus, on the way out of here, you're going to get a sheet. On this sheet are a series of phrases that you can use at Christmas dinner that are just kind phrases. I mean, really good kind phrases that you can use, like, I like your hair. Your shoes are nice. That shirt is unique. No, that's not true. We're not going to give you that. It's like the world's worst idea. We would never do that because it's not that easy. Patience and kindness is not that easy. And it's not about lip service. Patience and kindness has to do with how we go into the interaction. How we go into Christmas dinner means everything. Because let's face it, we've bred contempt for the people that we're closest to. Chaucer said this. He said, familiarity breeds contempt. The more familiar that you are with someone, the more contemptuous you become toward them, the more a disdain you have. You're just kind of like, whatever. And a great example, sorry, Mom, but this is a great example. Your mom, okay? When you introduce your mom to people, she's always on her best behavior, right? And she does this amazing thing. Everybody meets her, and then afterwards, your mom is so amazing. And you're like, yeah. She's the nicest person I ever met. No. I have firm memories of her having a nice look on her face, a smile, and saying horrible things. She is not the nicest person because I know her. She is so funny. No. Don't encourage it because after several decades of this, it's not funny. But see, that's us, I remember taking a group of people down to Central America, and we meet all of these kids that, need a lot of love, and so it's a mission trip, and we're loving them. We come in that first day, we're like, these kids are beautiful. We love these kids. Oh my gosh, they're amazing. And everybody that lives there are like, no, they're not. No, these are hellions. And by day 3, and we're like, we understand now. Yeah, because familiarity breeds contempt, okay? This is what I want you to do. Patience and kindness has everything to do with your mindset. Go into Christmas dinner like you're going on a mission trip. Do it, okay? Because that's how you're going to get through it, all right? No, but seriously, if you go into it with the mindset, and this is great, Ian McLaren said this. He said, be kind to people because everyone is struggling with something you know nothing about. If you go into it with that mindset of the person that's most irritating to you, think to yourself, are they struggling with a diagnosis they just found out and they're not telling anybody? Or their marriage, are they struggling with stuff and it's really difficult right now? And that's probably why they're not so fun to be around. If you have this mindset where you're able to give mercy, that is a huge thing. You need to go into it with that sense of everybody struggles with something and not everybody shares it. And listen, if you're thinking of following Jesus, if you're an incipient believer, you haven't put your trust in him yet, it's hard. It's tough. If you've decided to follow Jesus, you just got baptized, you're kind of young in your faith, this is a difficult thing to do. It is difficult to be patient and show kindness. If you've been following Jesus for decades, you know as well as anyone that it is difficult to follow Jesus and to show mercy to people. But listen, you can't say you know God's mercy if you don't show God's mercy. And the less mercy you show, the more it reveals how little mercy you understand. Because love's not proud, and that's what Paul says next. He's like, look, love is not proud. It's not arrogant. And we live in an arrogant culture. We really do. I picked a couple memes from Boss Babe. Apparently there's this entity out there online somewhere, social media, called Boss Babe, who she's got life figured out, and she's telling you all how to live it. So here are a couple quotes, a couple memes from her. I don't have time to make people understand my worth. Either you recognize it and treat me right or be cut off. It's horrible advice, by the way. I mean, it's terrible. But that's Boss Babe. Boss Babe is kind of the voice of our culture. Like, I don't have time for people who don't have time for me. How about this one? And I'm going to try to get through this without laughing. It's horrible. This is horrible advice. At this point in my life, if it's not making me money, if it's not making me better, or making me happy, then I don't have time for it. You might feel this way from time to time, but this is horrible life advice. Boss Babe and Jesus couldn't be more diametrically opposed to each other in the history of ideas. Because you look at something like this, and then you recall in Mark chapter 10, verse 45, Jesus shows up and he says, the Son of Man, he's talking about himself, he's saying the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God did not come to be served like a king, but came to serve as a ransom for many. And so Jesus says the point of life is to serve others. Boss Babe, go back to Boss Babe and what Boss Babe says. I don't have time for it. Who are you going to follow? Who are you going to choose to live by? Boss Babe or Jesus? That's how we need to go into Christmas dinner. And consequently, helping doesn't mean you're helpless. Serving people doesn't mean you become a welcome mat. You don't have to be vulnerable with everyone, but everyone is worth your effort to understand and love and serve, even if it's from a distance. Don't put yourself an arm's length of an angry fool. But it doesn't mean you're off the hook to love and serve the same person. Because love is not rude, it's not irritable. Paul continues on. He says, look, don't be rude. And you know, there are people that follow Jesus that say, well, I'm not rude. I just tell it like it is. You know, I'm just who I am. If other people have a problem with that, that's their problem. That's rude. That is rude. That's the essence of rudeness. The essence of rudeness is being yourself and not caring if it hurts other people. That's rude. Paul says, don't be that, okay? Don't be rude. Don't be irritable. Just because you speak English doesn't mean you're communicating with people. You see, to follow Jesus means that we love and serve other people. If we love and serve other people, we've got to understand that not everybody has the same love language. Not everybody hears love from us in the same way that we give love. And so it's up to us, not up to other people, to translate that. And so listen, if you're a teaser, you like to tease people. You know, that's the way you show love. You like to really tease someone. And if you figure out that there are people in your family that don't like to be teased, stop teasing. Stop it. Like, stop being yourself at the expense of others. That's not the point. The point isn't to be yourself. The point is to love people, to serve them. If you're a joker, the same way. Not everybody likes your humor. You know, you like awkward, stupid jokes. Now, dad jokes are exempt because they're just awesome. But I think someone clapped at that. It's awesome. I'm the king of dad jokes, so I just had to put that out there. But I'm talking about the type of jokes that make people feel uncomfortable. Stop doing that. Don't go into Christmas and be like, oh, I got some really good ones going to make people feel really stupid. Don't do that. Because you might think, you know, people might pay lip service like, oh, yeah, but inside they're like, this really feels uncomfortable. Don't promote that environment. Don't make it like that. Or maybe you're the person that likes to stir the pot, like, oh, politics, let's talk about, and what about? And this person's on the opposite end of the political spectrum than you, so you're like, hey, what about? We're just going to talk about this a little bit more, aren't we? Don't do that. No, that's rude. And you know what? Just because they think differently, it doesn't mean they're stupid. It doesn't mean they're uninformed. And it's not your responsibility to inform them. I think most of us overuse one side of communication. We talk too much. No one, listen to this is so important. No one has ever been thought rude listening. Why don't you go into Christmas dinner set on listening? Be an anthropologist. Find out what people are thinking rather than telling everybody what you feel. And I love how Brené Brown says this. She's like, look, if you get together with people that just are politically, spiritually, they're just very, very different than you, and you find it hard to talk about issues, forget the issues. Talk about the person and ask this question. You might want to write this down. It's a great question. So what makes you so passionate about XYZ? What makes you so passionate about this? Tell me, what happened in your life? And I want to hear more about you. And that way you get away from the issues. You want to, and this is the key, you want to, over Christmas, light people up with your conversation, not light people up with your conversation. There's a big difference. Big difference. Paul goes on and kind of folds into the next part here. He says, look, love doesn't demand its own way. And he's saying, look, stop nagging. Nagging politically, about what you eat, spiritual things. Nagging is a form of control. And naggers don't get this. I don't know why they don't get this. Naggers are blind to the fact that the more they nag, the less they get the desired result. In fact, it just alienates people. The more you nag, the less the people actually want to do it. Stop nagging. Listen to people on their terms, not yours. Don't pass them through your own filter. Say it with me, okay? Say this phrase with me. I can't make people do anything. Ready? 1, 2, 3. I can't make people do anything. It's so awesome. Every one of these, there's about half of you going, I'm not saying that. Because I can. And I will. You keep thinking that. You can't make people do anything, but you can do this. You can invest in the relationship to such a degree that they eventually come to you for advice. That's winning influence. And it starts with listening to people on their terms and loving them for who they are. Next portion, Paul says, love doesn't rejoice in injustice, it keeps no record of wrong. I love how in Princess Bride, Wesley says this to Princess. He says, life is pain, princess. And we need that. Some of us need that because we've been holding on to pain and resentment and anger and frustration with the people in our lives for way too long. And I'm talking about like the 99% of the everyday pains that we go through. People made a decision that we didn't like. Life took a course that we didn't really want. People decided something we disagree with. Your son decided something in terms of his lifestyle, whatever, and you're holding on to that. Your mom and dad, they decided to do something, and you're like, why? And I'm talking about that. I'm not talking about physical or sexual abuse. That needs to be reported. You need to talk to someone. You need to get out of that right now. So I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the normal pains. You might need to get over it. You need to hear this. Some of you have been holding on to pains way too long. It's over. It's done. No one's even talking about that anymore. Now all you have left is whether or not you're going to salvage this relationship. It was years ago. It was back in high school. If it's back in high school, you need to let it go. If you're in high school, and if it was years ago, you might need to move on. You don't even live there anymore. You're not even in that relationship anymore. Courts have a statute of limitations of 10 years. If it's over 10 years and you're still nursing this pain, you might need to just let it go. Say, I understand. I can love them in spite of it. You might say, well, they really don't care. They don't care about me. They continue to hurt me. Every time they come, they don't recognize this. They don't appreciate this. They just assume this. They forget this. You're right. You're totally right. They do. But what's the alternative? What's the alternative then? Are you going to hold back your love? Are you going to hold back your love from the people that hurt you? And that's your way of getting back at them? Is that what the end game is? Because that only hurts yourself. When you stop loving the people in your life because they've hurt you, guess what? You're drinking your own poison. There's a great Scottish statement that said, resentment is drinking poison and hoping the other person will die. That's what bitterness does to you. Because Paul says love never gives up. Ever. Never gives up. You know what? You can't stop loving people and call it self-preservation. Why? Because if you choose to follow Jesus, his example was that he gave his life for us. And his love cost him his life. His love led to him losing his life. And if you endeavor to follow Jesus, don't pretend you're above that. Love costs and it hurts, but it also redeems. You can show the appropriate love to someone that has hurt you. And sometimes that's from a distance. And guess what? It won't get shown back. You won't do these things and get reciprocated. It won't happen. But that's not the point. The point isn't to get something back. The point is to become more like Jesus. Let go of the hurt. Let go of the pain. And spend your love on someone this season who doesn't deserve it. That is a goal worth realizing, the goal of becoming more like Jesus, because I think it really comes down to two scenes. We've got two scenes here. We've got the crowded house, people that were so busy and so involved in their own lives that they didn't even realize the miracle that was happening right under their own roof. And then you got a bunch of people out in the field somewhere that have nothing to lose. Nothing. And their reaction is, well, let's go. Let's go. And you know what? Their presence at this house changed everything. Before the shepherds showed up, this was just a busy mess. And then the shepherds showed up and they're like, look what God's shown us. This is amazing. And it kind of gave testimony to the fact that when God tells you to move, to come see what he's doing, you better do it. And I'd rather have the sentiment of the shepherds at this point. I'd rather be in league with the shepherds who are kind of like, all right, God, sure, yeah, tell us where to go, where do we go? Rather than the family members, the good people of Bethlehem that are in this house that really don't have any time for God. Are you too busy? Or are you open to God's lead? Because these next 2 weeks, we are going to come in contact with some people that annoy us, irritate us. But we might also be coming into contact with people who are carrying hurts that just need us to be more like Jesus. Let's pray. Father, I pray that we can really understand and really feel right now by your Holy Spirit's prodding what we need to do over these next 2 weeks or so. Whether it's at Christmas dinner, whether it's New Year's Eve, whatever it is, when we're around family, God, I pray that you would do something in our hearts. Maybe it's a hurt that we need to let go of. Maybe it's an issue that we just need to drop. Maybe we just need to be resolute, God, that we're going to do this different this time around. We're going to love the people in our lives. God, I pray that you would help us. Pray that you would help us to get over these hurts. And I pray that you would birth something in us, that we would be excited about making Christmas dinner and the time around Christmas with our friends, with our family, a time in which we can love you by loving others. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.